He blamed 15 years of infertility on his wife, but when blessed with a baby boy, he refused to acknowledge the baby because of its color. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome to Mr. Peter Stories. I hope you're having an incredibly good afternoon, my dear friends, the most beautiful souls I've ever known. I wish you moments of peace, relaxation, and joy as you soak in the beauty of this time. But today, I must admit, I'm feeling a little upset. I'm on the verge of losing a challenge with my wife. There's only one day left, and I still need 1,100 subscribers to reach our goal of 10,000. My wife keeps teasing me, saying, "You're all talk, no action." Well, my family, now it's in your hands. If I lose, we all lose, so let's prove her wrong and make this happen together. I'm counting on your love and support. Also, I want to take a moment to ask, how was the last story? Your feedback means the world to me. Write yes in the comments if you enjoyed it. It motivates me to keep creating for you. So without further ado, let's dive into today's story. Let's begin, as always, with love. The autumn breeze whispered through the maple trees, lining Evergreen University's historic campus, carrying with it the sweet scent of jasmine from the botanical gardens. Golden leaves danced across the cobblestone pathways, creating a magical carpet beneath the feet of hurrying students. Among them was Alana Queen, her arms wrapped protectively around her psychology textbooks as she navigated the bustling courtyard. At 23, Alana was in her final year of her psychology program, her determination evident in every purposeful step she took. Her dark curls caught the afternoon sunlight, creating a halo effect that turned heads as she passed. But Alana barely noticed the admiring glances. Her mind was focused on her upcoming presentation on cognitive behavioral therapy, an area she hoped to specialize in once she established her practice. The old library building loomed ahead, its Gothic architecture a testament to the university's century-old legacy. Alana checked her watch, realizing she had exactly 45 minutes before her study group meeting. Time enough to gather the additional references she needed, assuming she could find them quickly in the psychology section's labyrinthine shelves. As she hurried up the worn stone steps, her phone buzzed with a message from her best friend Jade Martinez. "Don't forget dinner tonight, my brother's engagement party. You promised you'd come." Alana smiled, remembering her promise to attend. She'd been so consumed with her studies lately that social events had taken a back seat. Perhaps a night out would do her good. The heavy wooden doors creaked as she pushed them open, the familiar scent of old books and polished wood welcoming her into the library's hushed interior. Students hunched over laptops and textbooks filled the ancient oak tables, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of brass reading lamps. Alana's heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she made her way toward the psychology section in the West Wing. Lost in thought about her presentation, she rounded the corner near the reference section, and her world tilted on its axis. The collision was sudden and forceful, sending her books scattering across the floor in a cascade of papers and post-it notes. Alana found herself stumbling backward, only to be steadied by a pair of strong hands catching her shoulders. "I'm so sorry," a deep voice said, genuine concern evident in its rich timbre. Alana looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. Standing before her was Herschel Gibbs, the rising star of the business school, whose reputation preceded him everywhere on campus. She had heard of him, of course. Everyone had. The son of a successful international businessman, Herschel was already making waves in the business world, despite still being a student. His startup, launched from his dorm room 2 years ago, had already attracted significant venture capital attention. But the stories and rumors hadn't prepared her for the reality of his presence. Herschel stood over 6 feet tall, his broad shoulders filling out his tailored navy blazer perfectly. His warm brown eyes held a mixture of concern and amusement as he quickly knelt to help gather her scattered belongings. I should have been paying more attention, he said, collecting her textbooks. I was too busy arguing with my business partner on the phone. Alana found her voice, though it came out softer than intended. No, it's my fault. I was rushing and wasn't looking where I was going. She knelt beside him, reaching for her scattered notes, and their hands brushed. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through her fingers. Cognitive behavioral therapy and its applications in modern practice. Herschel read from one of her textbooks, his eyebrows rising with interest. Heavy reading for a Tuesday afternoon. It's for my presentation tomorrow, Alana explained, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. I'm specializing in therapeutic counseling. Ah, a future therapist, he smiled, revealing perfect white teeth. That explains the focused expression you had before our collision. You looked like you were solving all the world's problems in your head. His observation made her laugh, breaking the tension. Just trying to solve a few of them, one patient at a time. That's the plan, anyway. Standing, Herschel offered her hand to help her up. His grip was firm but gentle, his palm warm against hers. A noble goal, he said, still holding her hand a moment longer than necessary. I'm Herschel Gibbs, by the way, though you probably knew that already. Everyone seems to on this campus. There was a hint of self-deprecation in his tone that surprised her. Alana Queen, she replied, finally withdrawing her hand. And yes, I did know who you are. Your business venture's success is pretty much required reading in my economics elective. He groaned good-naturedly. Please tell me they're not using me as a case study already. I'm still trying to figure things out myself. His honesty was refreshing, completely at odds with the image of the confident, almost arrogant businessman she'd expected. Well, you must be doing something right, Alana said, adjusting her now reorganized stack of books in her arms. I heard your latest funding round was oversubscribed. You follow business news? Herschel asked, genuine interest lighting up his features. I try to stay informed, she shrugged. Psychology and business have more in common than most people think. Understanding human behavior is crucial in both fields. That's actually a fascinating perspective, he said, looking at her with new appreciation. I'd love to hear more about that. Would you maybe want to grab a coffee? Not now, obviously. You seem headed somewhere important, but perhaps tomorrow. Alana hesitated for a moment. Dating hadn't been on her radar lately, her focus entirely consumed by her studies and career plans. But there was something about Herschel that intrigued her, a depth behind his successful facade that she hadn't expected. Coffee would be nice, she found herself saying. I finish classes at 3 tomorrow. Perfect. There's this great little cafe just off campus, the Copper Kettle. Less crowded than the campus coffee shops, and they make actual good coffee. Shall we say 3:30? I know the place, Alana nodded. 3:30 works for me. Herschel's smile brightened. Great. I look forward to it, Alana Queen, future solver of world problems. As he turned to leave, Alana noticed something on the floor, a small leather-bound notebook that must have fallen from his pocket during their collision. Wait, she called after him. You dropped this. He turned back, reaching for the notebook with a look of relief. Thank you. This contains all my brilliant ideas, or at least the ones I think are brilliant at 3 a.m. He winked, tucking it safely into his blazer pocket. Another reason to be grateful for our little run-in. Watching him walk away, Alana felt a strange mixture of excitement and uncertainty. She hadn't come to the library looking for anything except research materials, but fate seemed to have other plans. Little did she know that this chance encounter would set in motion a chain of events that would completely transform her life. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Alana found her reference materials, met with her study group, and even managed to refine her presentation outline. But her mind kept drifting back to those few minutes in the library. Herschel's warm eyes, his unexpected humility, the way his hand felt helping her up. These details played on repeat in her thoughts. That evening, as she got ready for Jade's brother's engagement party, Alana found herself putting extra care into her appearance. She chose a deep burgundy dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly, its flowing fabric moving gracefully as she walked. Her mother had always told her that the right outfit could make a woman feel invincible, and tonight Alana understood that wisdom perfectly. The engagement party was in full swing when she arrived at La Luna, one of the city's most elegant restaurants. Jade immediately pulled her into a warm hug, her face glowing with happiness for her brother's joy. "You look amazing," Jade exclaimed, stepping back to admire Alana's outfit. "Something's different about you tonight." "Spill," Alana laughed, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "Nothing's different. I just had an interesting day." "Interesting how?" Jade pressed, her journalist's instincts picking up on the slight hesitation in Alana's voice. Before Alana could respond, a familiar voice behind her made her heart skip a beat. "Alana, what a pleasant surprise." She turned to find Herschel standing there, looking even more handsome in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His presence at the party shouldn't have surprised her. The business and social circles in their city weren't that large after all. "Herschel," she managed, aware of Jade's curious gaze darting between them. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm friends with the groom," he explained, then nodded politely to Jade. "You must be the sister of the hour. Congratulations to your family." Jade's face lit up with recognition. "Oh my God, you're Herschel Gibbs. Your interview in Business Weekly last month was brilliant. The way you're revolutionizing sustainable technology investment is fascinating." "Thank you," he replied modestly, but his eyes stayed on Alana. "Though I'm finding myself more interested in the intersection of psychology and business lately." The private joke made Alana smile, remembering their conversation from earlier. "Would you like to dance?" he asked suddenly, as the band struck up a slow melody. "Unless you're here with someone?" "No," Alana said quickly, perhaps too quickly, judging by Jade's barely suppressed grin. "I mean, no, I'm not here with anyone. And yes, I'd love to dance." As Herschel led her to the dance floor, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back, Alana felt as though she was stepping into a dream. He drew her into his arms with natural grace, maintaining a respectful distance while still holding her close enough to catch the subtle scent of his cologne. "I was going to wait until tomorrow to see you again," he said softly, guiding her through the steps of the dance. "But fate seems to have other plans." "Do you believe in fate?" Alana asked, genuinely curious about his answer. He considered for a moment before responding. "I believe in making the most of opportunities when they present themselves, and meeting you twice in one day feels like an opportunity I shouldn't ignore." The honesty in his voice touched something in Alana's heart. She had always been cautious, especially when it came to matters of the heart. Her focus on her studies and career had served as a convenient shield against potential emotional entanglements. But something about Herschel made her want to lower those carefully constructed defenses. As they danced, the world seemed to fade away around them. The music, the other couples, even Jade's not-so-subtle observation from across the room, all of it became background noise to the rhythm of their connection. They talked about everything and nothing, their studies, their dreams, their fears. Herschel spoke about the pressure of living up to his family's legacy while wanting to forge his own path. Alana shared her passion for helping others heal and grow through therapy. The evening passed like a dream, and when it was time to leave, neither seemed eager to say goodbye. They stood outside the restaurant, the city lights twinkling around them like earthbound stars. "So," Herschel said, his hands in his pockets, "are we still on for coffee tomorrow?" "Absolutely," Alana replied, surprised by how much she was looking forward to it. "Though it feels like we've already covered most of our first date conversations." "First date?" He raised an eyebrow playfully. Was this our first date, Ms. Queen? No, this was a chance encounter at an engagement party, she corrected him, matching his teasing tone. Our first date is tomorrow at 3:30, Mr. Gibbs. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I like how you think. Clear boundaries and expectations. Very therapeutic. As her Uber arrived, Herschel opened the door for her. Until tomorrow, then, he said softly, his hand brushing hers as she got in. That night, as Alana lay in bed replaying the events of the day, she couldn't help but feel that her life was about to change dramatically. The practical part of her mind warned her to be cautious, to remember her goals and priorities. But her heart, usually so carefully guarded, was already beginning to sing a different tune. Little did she know that this was just the beginning of a story that would test her in ways she never imagined. The man who had swept her off her feet today would take her on a journey of love, pain, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption. But for now, in this moment, all she felt was the pure, untainted joy of new beginnings and possibilities. As sleep finally claimed her, Alana's last thoughts were of warm brown eyes and gentle hands, of dancing under crystal chandeliers, and of the promise of tomorrow's coffee date. The autumn breeze outside her window carried the same hint of jasmine from the morning, as if the day had come full circle, ending exactly where it was meant to. In the years to come, Alana would look back on this day, October 15th, as the day her life truly began. Not because of the love story that started, but because of the strength she would ultimately discover within herself through all that was to come. But those were lessons for another day. For now she drifted off to sleep, her dreams filled with the promise of new beginnings and the feeling that something extraordinary was about to unfold. The city hummed its nighttime lullaby outside her window, unaware that it had just witnessed the first chapter of a story that would become legend in its own right. A tale of love, betrayal, and the unbreakable spirit of a woman who would rise from the ashes of heartbreak to build something beautiful from the ruins of broken dreams. The stage was set. The players had taken their positions, and the curtain was rising on a drama that would test the very limits of human emotion. But that was all yet to come. For now, there was just this perfect moment, suspended in time like a dewdrop on a morning flower, holding all the promise and possibility that new love brings. And somewhere across the city, Herschel Gibbs too lay awake, thinking of dark curls and intelligent eyes, of chance meetings and destiny's hand, unaware of the role he would play in shaping both their futures. The night held its secrets close, as nights often do, waiting for time to unveil the story that was about to unfold. Chapter 2. The Courtship. The Copper Kettle was exactly as Alana remembered it, a cozy haven tucked away from the university's bustling main streets. Vintage coffee grinders and antique copper kettles adorned the exposed brick walls, while the aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air. She arrived 5 minutes early for their coffee date, her heart fluttering with anticipation. Herschel was already there, seated at a corner table near the window. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with an old-world courtesy that seemed natural rather than affected. Today he wore a casual navy sweater that complemented his athletic build, looking more relaxed than he had in his business attire. "I was half afraid you wouldn't come," he admitted, as they settled in. "Last night felt almost too perfect to be real." "I know what you mean," Alana replied, unwinding her scarf. "I kept wondering if I'd imagined the whole evening." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, picking up where they'd left off the night before. Herschel spoke passionately about his vision for sustainable technology and his desire to make a real difference in the world. His eyes lit up as he described his latest project, developing affordable solar energy solutions for underserved communities. "It's not just about profit," he explained, leaning forward intently. My father built his empire on traditional energy sources, but I want to do something different, something that matters. Alana found herself drawn in by his sincerity. That's why you started your own company instead of joining your father's. Exactly. Dad wasn't thrilled at first, but he's coming around, especially since the venture capital funding came through. He paused, running a hand through his hair self-consciously. Sorry, I'm talking too much about business. Tell me more about your dreams. What made you choose psychology? Alana took a sip of her latte, gathering her thoughts. I've always been fascinated by how people think and feel, what drives them, but it was more than that. Growing up, I saw how many people struggle silently with their mental health, afraid to seek help because of stigma or lack of access to care. I want to change that. Noble indeed, Herschel smiled, echoing his words from their first meeting. You have a warrior's heart, Alana Queen. That first coffee date stretched into dinner, neither wanting the evening to end. Days turned into weeks, and soon they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Herschel would surprise her with lunch deliveries during her long study sessions in the library. Alana would stop by his office late in the evening, dragging him away from work for much-needed breaks. Their different backgrounds and perspectives led to fascinating discussions. Herschel's practical business mind complemented Alana's more empathetic approach to life. They challenged each other, grew together, learning from their differences rather than being divided by them. One crisp Saturday morning, Herschel took her hiking in the nearby mountains. The autumn colors were at their peak, painting the landscape in brilliant shades of red and gold. As they reached the summit, overlooking the city below, he pulled a carefully packed gourmet picnic from his backpack. You never cease to amaze me, Alana laughed, watching him lay out an array of delicacies on a checkered blanket. How do you find time to plan things like this? You make me want to make time, he replied simply, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. You've changed how I see the world, Alana. Before you, I was all about targets and deadlines. Now I'm learning to appreciate the moments in between. Their first kiss happened there on the mountaintop, surrounded by nature's glory. It was gentle and unhurried, full of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, Alana saw her own emotions reflected in Herschel's eyes. Wonder, joy, and a touch of fear at the intensity of what was building between them. As autumn deepened into winter, their relationship grew stronger. They spent cozy evenings in Alana's apartment, she studying while he worked on business proposals, comfortable in shared silence. Other nights they explored the city's hidden gems, tiny jazz clubs, hole-in-the-wall restaurants, art galleries featuring emerging local artists. Herschel introduced her to his world of high-powered business dinners and charity galas. Alana was initially intimidated by the wealth and influence that surrounded him, but her natural grace and intelligence soon won over even his most discerning associates. She brought a fresh perspective to their conversations, often helping Herschel see business challenges from new angles. In turn, Alana shared her world with him. She took him to community mental health workshops where she volunteered, showing him the real impact of accessible psychological care. Herschel was moved by the stories they heard, and soon his company was exploring ways to support mental health initiatives in underserved areas. Their different backgrounds sometimes led to moments of tension. Herschel's privileged upbringing occasionally showed in assumptions he made about money and opportunity, but he was always willing to learn and grow when Alana gently pointed out his blind spots. She admired his ability to acknowledge his mistakes and actively work to broaden his perspective. One evening, as they walked through the snowy city streets after dinner, Herschel suddenly stopped and turned to her. "Move in with me," he said, his breath visible in the cold air. "I know it's fast, but I've never been more sure of anything." Alana hesitated, her practical nature warring with her heart. "What about my lease? My studies?" Your lease is up in 2 months anyway, he reminded her, and my penthouse is actually closer to campus than your current place. But if you're not ready, I understand. I just know that every morning I wake up without you feels like a morning wasted. His honesty touched her deeply. That night, as they lay tangled in his silk sheets, planning their future together, Alana felt truly at peace. The city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, but her world had narrowed to this moment, this man, this feeling of complete rightness. Spring brought new changes and challenges. Alana's final exams loomed, while Herschel's company entered crucial negotiations for international expansion. They supported each other through the stress, finding strength in their partnership. Late-night study sessions were fueled by takeout and tender encouragement. Business strategies were refined over morning coffee and gentle debates. Their compatibility showed in small ways, how they could communicate volumes with just a look, how they anticipated each other's needs, how they balanced each other's strengths and weaknesses. Herschel's drive pushed Alana to dream bigger, while her compassion helped him stay grounded in what truly mattered. But there were hints of shadows to come, subtle signs that neither noticed in their love-struck state. Sometimes Herschel's ambition made him unnecessarily competitive, turning even small disagreements into battles to be won. Occasionally, his need for control manifested in well-meant but overbearing gestures, rearranging Alana's schedule to maximize efficiency, making decisions about their social life without consulting her. Alana, focused on maintaining harmony, often chose to adapt rather than confront these small issues. Her training in psychology helped her rationalize his behavior, finding explanations in his high-pressure upbringing and the demands of his position. Love, she believed, would smooth these rough edges over time. Their friends watched their relationship bloom with varying degrees of support and concern. Jade, ever protective of her best friend, worried that Alana was losing herself in Herschel's world. "Just make sure you don't forget who you are," she cautioned during one of their girls' nights out. "I know who I am," Alana assured her. "Herschel doesn't want to change me. He loves me for exactly who I am." At that moment, she believed it completely. Looking back years later, she would recognize this period as both the height of their love and the beginning of its undoing. But hindsight has a clarity that the heart in the moment cannot possess. Summer arrived in a blaze of heat and possibility. Herschel's company successfully launched its international division, and he celebrated by whisking Alana away for a romantic weekend at a luxury coastal resort. Under star-filled skies, with the sound of waves providing nature's music, they danced barefoot on the beach. "I never thought I could feel this way about anyone," Herschel confessed, holding her close. "You make me want to be better, to do better, to build something meaningful that goes beyond just making money." Alana touched his face gently, memorizing every detail of this perfect moment. "You already are doing something meaningful. I see it every day in how you're changing your industry, how you're using your success to help others." That weekend, they talked about marriage for the first time, not in concrete terms, but in the abstract way of lovers imagining their future together. They painted pictures with words, a beautiful ceremony, a home filled with love and laughter, children running through sun-dappled gardens. Neither could have predicted how differently that future would unfold. The universe, in its infinite wisdom or cruel jest, was already setting in motion the events that would test their love beyond its breaking point. But for now, they were simply two souls intertwined, believing in the forever kind of love that fairy tales promise and reality so rarely delivers. As summer waned, Alana graduated with honors, her thesis on trauma recovery drawing acclaim from her professors. Herschel attended the ceremony, beaming with pride as she received her diploma. That evening, at the celebration dinner he hosted for her family and closest friends, everyone remarked on how perfect they seemed together. "When you know," Herschel's mother said warmly, embracing Alana, "and I've never seen my son so happy." The night ended with them slow dancing in their penthouse, the city spread out below like a carpet of stars. "I love you," Herschel whispered against her hair, "more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," Alana replied, her heart full to bursting with joy and hope for their future. In that moment, their love felt invincible, capable of weathering any storm. They couldn't know that the greatest tests still lay ahead, that the very foundations of their relationship would be shaken to their core. But perhaps that's the nature of true love stories. They must be forged in fire, tested by trials, before revealing their true strength or fatal flaws. As the summer night wrapped around them like a warm embrace, Alana and Herschel continued their dance, lost in the music and each other. The city hummed its eternal lullaby below, the stars wheeled overhead, and two hearts beat in perfect synchronization, believing in the permanence of their love. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of passion, understanding, and growth. They had built something beautiful together, a love that seemed destined to last forever. But destiny, as they would learn, often has plans of its own. Plans that unfold in ways we least expect, teaching us lessons we never knew we needed to learn. For now, though, they were simply two people deeply in love, standing on the threshold of their future together. The challenges that lay ahead were still hidden beyond the horizon, and their hearts were full of nothing but hope and promise. As the night deepened around them, Alana rested her head on Herschel's chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was a sound that had become home to her, a rhythm she thought would always be part of her life's music. The future stretched before them like an unwritten book, its pages blank and waiting for their story to unfold. Little did they know that their greatest chapter was yet to begin, and that the true test of their love would come not in these moments of joy, but in the valleys of despair that waited ahead. But such is the nature of love. It must be tested to be proven, challenged to be strengthened, and sometimes broken to be rebuilt into something even more beautiful. The city lights continued to twinkle below, bearing silent witness to their love story as it unfolded, keeping its secrets about the trials and triumphs that lay ahead in the chapters yet to come. Chapter 3. Wedding Bells. The morning of October 15th, exactly 1 year after their first meeting, dawned crisp and clear, as if nature itself had conspired to create the perfect wedding day. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the bridal suite at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, where Alana stood before a full-length mirror, hardly recognizing her reflection. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of pearl-white silk and delicate lace, custom designed to flow like water over her curves. Tiny crystals caught the light with every movement, creating a subtle shimmer that made her appear to glow from within. Her dark curls were swept up in an elegant arrangement, with a few tendrils left loose to soften her face. "You look like a queen," Jade whispered, adjusting the cathedral-length veil. As maid of honor, she had been by Alana's side through every step of the whirlwind 6-month engagement. "Herschel won't know what hit him." Alana's mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "My beautiful girl," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I always knew you'd make a stunning bride, but this—" She gestured helplessly, words failing her. The bridal suite buzzed with activity as the other bridesmaids made final adjustments to their champagne-colored gowns. The wedding planner, tablet in hand, coordinated last-minute details with practiced efficiency. Everything was proceeding according to plan, each element carefully chosen to create the fairy tale wedding Herschel had insisted on giving her. In a quiet moment, Alana found herself alone at the window, looking out over the city where their love story had begun. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Herschel had spared no expense, wanting to give her the wedding of her dreams. Sometimes it felt overwhelming. The scale of it all, the media attention their engagement had attracted, the expectations that came with marrying into his world. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was her father, looking distinguished in his tuxedo, his eyes growing misty at the sight of her. "Princess," he said softly, using his childhood nickname for her. "It's time." The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan had been transformed into a fairy tale setting. Thousands of white roses and orchids created an enchanted garden atmosphere, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, a mix of family, friends, and the city's elite who had come to witness the union of Herschel Gibbs, rising business star, and his beloved Alana. As the string quartet began playing Canon in D, Alana took her father's arm. Her heart pounded beneath the silk and lace of her gown. This was it. The moment she had been dreaming of, the beginning of her forever with Herschel. The massive double doors opened, and a collective gasp rose from the assembled guests. Alana felt rather than saw their admiration as she began her walk down the aisle, but her eyes were fixed ahead, where Herschel stood waiting for her at the altar. He looked devastatingly handsome in his bespoke tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that took her breath away. Love, pride, and something akin to awe transformed his features as he watched her approach. In that moment, all her doubts and anxieties melted away. This was right. This was meant to be. When her father placed her hand in Herschel's, the warmth of his touch grounded her. "You are beyond beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The ceremony itself was a blur of traditional vows and personal promises. Herschel's voice remained steady as he pledged his life and love to her. "Alana Queen, you walked into my life by accident and became my purpose by choice. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. You are my North Star, my home, my everything." Alana's voice trembled slightly as she spoke her vows. "Herschel Gibbs, you showed me that love doesn't have to be a choice between following your dreams and sharing your heart. You encouraged me to fly higher while keeping me grounded. I promise to be your partner, your confidant, and your biggest supporter through all of life's adventures." The exchange of rings sealed their promises, platinum bands that symbolized their eternal commitment. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Herschel's kiss was tender yet passionate, drawing appreciative applause from their guests. The reception that followed was a celebration befitting a modern fairy tale. The ballroom had been transformed again during the ceremony, now featuring intimate round tables surrounding a sprawling dance floor. Crystal centerpieces caught and reflected the warm lighting, creating an atmosphere of magical intimacy despite the grandeur of the space. Their first dance as husband and wife was to "At Last" by Etta James, a choice that made both their mothers cry. Herschel led Alana around the floor with practiced grace, the result of the private dance lessons he'd insisted they take. "Happy Mrs. Gibbs," he murmured in her ear. "Deliriously," she replied, savoring the new name. "Though I'm keeping Queen professionally." "Of course you are," he chuckled. "You're your own woman. It's one of the things I love most about you." The evening flowed like the endless champagne, speeches that made them laugh and cry, gourmet courses that delighted their guests, dancing that went on until the small hours. Herschel's father raised a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes, speaking of love's power to transform and elevate us. Jade's maid of honor speech perfectly balanced humor and heart, telling the story of how she'd watched her best friend fall in love. As midnight approached, Alana found a quiet moment to slip away to the terrace for some air. The city sparkled below, a symphony of lights and possibilities. She heard familiar footsteps behind her and smiled as Herschel's arms wrapped around her waist. "Any regrets?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "Not a single one," she replied, leaning back against him. "Though I still can't believe how much this all cost." "You're worth every penny and more," he said firmly. "Besides, this isn't just a wedding. It's a statement. The world needs to know how much I treasure you." Those words would come back to haunt her years later, when she understood that for Herschel, everything was at least partially about image and impression. But in that moment, they simply made her feel cherished and secure. The party continued well into the early hours, but eventually the newlyweds made their escape. A vintage Rolls-Royce whisked them away to the Metropolitan's presidential suite, where rose petals created a path to a champagne-chilled celebration for two. Later, as they lay tangled in the luxurious sheets, Alana traced lazy patterns on Herschel's chest. "I keep thinking about our vows," she said softly, "about promising forever." "Having second thoughts already?" he teased, capturing her hand and kissing her palm. "Never," she assured him. "Just thinking about how lucky we are to have found each other. Some people search their whole lives for what we have." "We're blessed," he agreed, pulling her closer. "And I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." The next morning, they boarded Herschel's company jet for their honeymoon, 3 weeks split between the Maldives and Italy. It was another example of his determination to give her everything, to share his world of privilege and luxury with her. As the plane took off, Alana looked down at her wedding ring, still feeling somewhat surreal. She had married her Prince Charming, was embarking on a fairy tale honeymoon, and had a promising career ahead of her. Life seemed perfect, almost too perfect. If she had known then what challenges lay ahead, would she have made the same choice? Would she have said, "I do," knowing the pain and betrayal that waited in their future? Years later, when asked this question, her answer would surprise many. Because despite everything that would happen, despite the heartbreak and tears, this day had given her something precious. Belief in her own capacity to love completely, without reservation. The city disappeared beneath the clouds as they ascended into their future together. Alana rested her head on her new husband's shoulder, content in the warmth of his presence and the promise of their shared tomorrow. The wounds that would come, the tests they would face, the betrayals that would shake their foundation to its core, all of that was still hidden behind the horizon of time. For now, there was just this. 2 hearts beating in sync, 2 lives merged into one, and a love that felt strong enough to weather any storm. The universe, ever the master of irony, would soon put that belief to the test in ways they could never have imagined. As the plane carried them toward their honeymoon destination, Alana and Herschel Gibbs were simply 2 people deeply in love, beginning their life together with hope and joy in their hearts. The chapter of their courtship had ended, and a new one was beginning, one that would ultimately teach them both profound lessons about love, trust, and the true meaning of strength. The sun rose higher in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of gold and pink. Below them, the world continued its eternal dance, unaware that it was witnessing the beginning of a story that would test the very limits of human emotion and resilience. But those challenges were still hidden in the mists of tomorrow, and today was for love, joy, and the celebration of new beginnings. Chapter 4. Early Years. The sound of shattering glass echoed through their penthouse. Alana stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at the remains of a crystal wine glass, a wedding gift from Herschel's parents. 6 months into their marriage, and already hairline cracks were appearing in their perfect facade. "I'll handle it," Herschel said sharply, reaching for the dustpan. "You'll cut yourself." "I'm not helpless," Alana replied, but stepped back anyway. It wasn't worth the argument. Lately, everything seemed to spark tension between them, his increasing need to control every aspect of their lives clashing with her desire for independence. Their mornings had developed a rigid routine. Herschel would wake at precisely 5 a.m. for his workout, followed by a strictly scheduled breakfast where he'd review their daily itineraries. Today, he frowned at her calendar on his tablet. "You've scheduled 3 new patients." His tone carried disapproval. "We're supposed to be trying for a baby. You need to reduce your stress levels." Alana set down her coffee cup carefully. "My practice is important to me, Herschel." "We agreed I'd continue working after marriage." "Of course you can work," he said dismissively, "but within reason. I've been researching fertility optimization, and stress is a major factor." It was always like this now. Every decision, every choice, filtered through the lens of their attempts to conceive. Their love life had become a carefully scheduled program of optimal timing and positions. Romance gave way to temperature charts and ovulation tests. One evening, returning from a particularly difficult therapy session with a traumatized client, Alana found Herschel in their home office, surrounded by medical journals and fertility studies. "I've scheduled appointments with 3 more specialists," he announced without looking up. "Top fertility experts in Europe. We'll fly out next week." "Next week?" Alana's heart sank. "I have patients, scheduled commitments. I've already had your assistant reschedule everything." He finally met her eyes, his expression a mixture of determination and something darker. "This is more important." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. More important than her career, her independence, her choices. Alana felt the walls of their magnificent penthouse closing in. Their first major fight erupted over a charity gala. Alana had agreed to speak about mental health awareness, but Herschel objected to the timing. "It's during your fertile window," he argued, pacing their bedroom. "You need to be relaxed, focused on conception. Public speaking increases cortisol levels." "Stop treating me like a breeding machine." The words burst out before she could stop them. "I'm your wife, not a science experiment." His face hardened. "Everything I do is for us, for our future family. Why can't you understand that?" The argument ended like most of them did, with Herschel retreating to his home office and Alana lying awake, wondering what had happened to the man who'd once encouraged her dreams. Their second year of marriage brought new pressures. Herschel's company was expanding rapidly, demanding more of his time and attention. Yet somehow, he still managed to micromanage their conception efforts. "You're drinking coffee again," he noted one morning, disapproval heavy in his voice. "The nutritionist specifically said—" "1 cup won't hurt," Alana interrupted, clinging to this small act of defiance. "Every detail matters." He took the cup from her hands, dumping it in the sink. "We have to be disciplined about this." The word disciplined seemed to define their life now. Disciplined diets, disciplined schedules, disciplined lovemaking. The spontaneity and joy that had marked their courtship felt like a distant memory. Their 3rd anniversary dinner became another battlefield. At an exclusive restaurant overlooking the city, Herschel presented Alana with a gift, another stack of books on fertility and conception. "I thought anniversaries were about celebrating our love," she said quietly, pushing the books aside. "This is about our love," he insisted, "about creating the family we've always wanted. Is it what we want or what your father expects?" The question slipped out, touching a nerve they usually avoided. Herschel's expression darkened. "Don't bring my father into this. He only wants what's best for us." "Best for the Gibbs family name, you mean?" The rest of dinner passed in tense silence, their special evening ruined by unspoken resentments and mounting pressures. Their 4th year brought a new level of intervention. Herschel hired a team of specialists, fertility experts, nutritionists, acupuncturists, and more. Their penthouse became a revolving door of appointments and consultations. "These people are invading our home," Alana protested after a particularly invasive session. "Our bedroom feels like a medical clinic." "They're here to help us," Herschel snapped. "Unless you don't want a baby as much as I do." The accusation stung. Of course she wanted a child, but not at the cost of her identity, her career, her sanity. One night, after another failed pregnancy test, Alana found herself on their terrace, gasping for air. The city lights blurred through her tears as the weight of their situation crushed her chest. Herschel found her there, but his attempt at comfort felt mechanical, rehearsed. "We'll try again next month. I've found a new treatment protocol." "Stop." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Just stop." He didn't understand, couldn't understand how his relentless pursuit of perfection was suffocating them both. Their 5th year marked a turning point. At a family dinner, Herschel's father made a pointed comment about the Gibbs family legacy. The pressure to produce an heir hung heavy in the air. Later that night, Alana overheard Herschel in his office, arguing with someone on the phone. "I don't care what it costs," he hissed. "Find me better doctors, better treatments. Money is no object." She slipped away unnoticed, realizing that her husband's obsession with having a child had become something darker, more desperate. Their 6th year together brought more specialists, more treatments, more scheduled intimacy. Their once passionate love life had been reduced to a clinical exercise in conception. "Your temperature's optimal," Herschel would announce, checking their fertility tracking app. "We should try now." Romance died a slow death in their marriage, replaced by charts, schedules, and mounting disappointment. The breaking point came during their 7th year. At another charity gala, a well-meaning friend asked about their family plans. Before Alana could respond, Herschel smoothly took control of the conversation, detailing their journey as if discussing a business venture. Later that night, Alana stood before their bathroom mirror, barely recognizing herself. The vibrant, independent woman who had captured Herschel's heart was fading, replaced by someone who felt more like a project than a partner. "We need to talk," she said when he entered their bedroom. "Can it wait?" He barely looked up from his phone. "I'm reviewing the latest test results." "No." Her voice was stronger now. "It can't wait. We're losing ourselves, Herschel. We're losing everything that made us, us." He finally met her gaze, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she'd married. But then his expression hardened again, the wall of control sliding back into place. "Everything I do is for our future," he said firmly. "You knew how important family was to me when you married me." The words hung between them, a reminder of how far they'd strayed from their early dreams of partnership and love. As their 8th year of marriage approached, Alana watched their relationship crumble beneath the weight of expectation and control. Every failed pregnancy test drove Herschel to new levels of obsession while pushing them further apart emotionally. The city lights still sparkled below their penthouse windows, but their glow no longer held the magic it once did. The fairy tale romance had transformed into a cautionary tale of how love could be destroyed by the very dreams it was meant to fulfill. None of them could have predicted how their story would unfold, how the next few years would test them in ways they never imagined. For now, they remained trapped in their gilded cage, their early years of marriage becoming a bitter reminder of dreams lost and love sacrificed on the altar of perfection. Chapter 5. The First Cracks. Thunder crashed outside their penthouse windows, mirroring the storm brewing within. After 10 years of marriage, the pristine facade of their relationship was beginning to show deep, irreparable cracks. Alana stood in their master bathroom, staring at another negative pregnancy test, while Herschel's voice carried through the door, harsh and demanding. "The specialists in Switzerland are expecting us next week." I've already arranged the jet. Her hands trembled as she opened the door. I'm not going. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with defiance. Herschel's face darkened, a look she'd grown to dread over the years. What do you mean you're not going? His voice was dangerously quiet. These are the best fertility experts in Europe. I mean, I'm done. Alana's voice gained strength. Done with being treated like a defective machine. Done with having my body and life controlled by your obsession. Obsession? He stepped closer, his presence filling the doorway. Is that what you call wanting a family? Wanting what every normal couple has? The word normal hit like a slap. Normal couples don't schedule every intimate moment like a business meeting. Normal couples don't turn their home into a medical facility. Normal couples love each other for who they are, not what they can or can't provide. Her outburst echoed off the marble walls. For a moment she saw something flicker in Herschel's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the cold mask of control she'd grown to hate. I've invested too much in this to give up now, he said, his tone reminiscent of his business dealings. The Gibbs name? The Gibbs name. Alana laughed bitterly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Your father's expectations, the family legacy. When did having a child become about your family's reputation instead of our love? His jaw clenched. You knew who I was when you married me. You knew what this meant. I married a man who loved me, she shot back. Not this controlling stranger who's taken his place. Later that week, at a charity gala they couldn't avoid, their private drama played out beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Metropolitan Hotel. Society's elite surrounded them, unaware of the tension crackling between the seemingly perfect couple. Mrs. Harrison was just asking about children, Herschel said through gritted teeth as they danced. Do you know how embarrassing it is to keep making excuses? Embarrassing? Alana pulled back slightly, meeting his eyes. Try humiliating. Try having your body discussed like a failed investment at every social gathering. Try having your worth reduced to your ability to conceive. His grip on her waist tightened. You're being dramatic. And you're being cruel. The music continued, but they might as well have been in different worlds. Alana remembered their first dance in this same ballroom, how full of love and hope they'd been. Now they were just going through the motions, maintaining appearances while their relationship crumbled. Their 11th anniversary passed without celebration. Herschel spent the day in back-to-back meetings while Alana threw herself into her therapy practice. When she arrived home that evening, she found him in his study, surrounded by medical journals and fertility research. I didn't forget, he said without looking up. I've scheduled us for a new treatment trial. Consider it an anniversary gift. Something snapped inside her. She swept the journals off his desk, papers flying everywhere. A treatment trial? That's your idea of an anniversary gift? What happened to the man who used to write me love poems? Who planned surprise weekend getaways? Who looked at me like I was enough? Herschel stood slowly, his face a storm of emotions. That man grew up, realized that love isn't enough, that life demands more than romantic gestures and empty promises. Empty, her voice broke. Was that all it was to you? Empty? He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair, a gesture that once endeared him to her, but now just signaled another argument brewing. You're twisting my words. You know I love you. Do I? Because lately, it feels like you love the idea of what I could give you more than who I am. The fight that followed was explosive. Years of resentment and pain burst forth like a dam breaking. Alana finally voiced every hurt, every slight, every moment she'd felt reduced to her reproductive capacity. You time my cycles like stock market trends, she cried. You track my temperature like quarterly reports. When was the last time you touched me just because you wanted to, not because some chart said it was optimal? Because it matters, he roared back. Every detail, every moment matters. Do you think I enjoy this? Do you think I want our lives ruled by charts and schedules? Then why? She stepped closer, searching his face for any trace of the man she'd married. Why are you doing this to us? His answer chilled her. Because failure isn't an option. Not in this, not in anything. The words revealed the true depth of their problem. This wasn't just about having a child anymore. It was about control, about Herschel's pathological need to succeed at any cost. That night, Alana slept in the guest room for the first time in their marriage. As she lay awake, listening to the city below, she realized their relationship had become like one of Herschel's business acquisitions, something to be managed, controlled, and optimized for maximum return. The next morning, she found a sleek jewelry box on the kitchen counter. Inside was an expensive diamond bracelet, Herschel's typical response to their fights. But underneath it was something else, an appointment card for yet another fertility specialist. She left both items untouched and went to work. Days passed in tense silence. They moved through their luxury penthouse like ghosts, avoiding direct contact while maintaining a perfect facade for the outside world. At social events, they still played their parts flawlessly, the powerful businessman and his accomplished wife. But behind closed doors, the distance between them grew into a chasm. Their 12th year of marriage brought new pressures. Herschel's father, during a family dinner, made pointed remarks about other couples' children. The Williams' youngest just started at Harvard. Remarkable how that family continues its legacy. Alana watched her husband's knuckles whiten around his fork, saw the muscle in his jaw tick with tension. Later that night, she found him staring at old photos from their early years together. "We were happy once," she said softly from the doorway. He didn't look up. "We can be happy again, once we solve this problem." "I'm not a problem to be solved, Herschel. I'm your wife." His response was telling. "Right now, you're both." The final straw came during their 13th year. Alana discovered that Herschel had hired private investigators to monitor her schedule, ensuring she followed the strict regimen his latest fertility expert had prescribed. "You had me followed." The betrayal cut deep. "Like a suspect? A criminal?" "I had to be sure you were following the protocol exactly," he defended, as if it were perfectly reasonable. "These treatments are too expensive to waste because of non-compliance." "Non-compliance?" She stared at him, truly seeing what they'd become. "Listen to yourself. I'm your wife, not one of your employees." But that was exactly how he'd begun to treat her, as an asset to be managed, a project to be optimized, a problem to be solved. The man who had once loved her for her independence now sought to control her every move. Their 14th year brought more specialists, more treatments, more scheduled intimacy. Each failure drove Herschel to new levels of obsession while pushing them further apart emotionally. "Maybe we should consider other options," Alana suggested one evening. "Adoption, perhaps." His response was immediate and harsh. "Number it has to be ours. A true Gibbs heir." Those words revealed everything about his priorities, about what their marriage had become. No longer a partnership of love and mutual support, but a means to an end, the continuation of a dynasty. As their 15th anniversary approached, Alana found herself standing in their marble bathroom, looking at her reflection. The woman who had once glowed with love and happiness now seemed hollow, drained by years of pressure and control. Unknown to either of them, the universe was about to throw them a curveball that would shatter their carefully constructed world. But for now, they remained trapped in their cycle of control and resentment. their once beautiful love story becoming a cautionary tale of how dreams could become obsessions and how the pursuit of perfection could destroy everything it touched. Chapter 6. The Descent. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum, silent except for the hum of medical equipment that had taken over their home. 15 years into their marriage, Alana and Herschel's relationship had devolved into a cold war of unspoken accusations and bitter resentment. Alana stood in what was once their bedroom, but now resembled a private clinic. The king-sized bed where they'd once made love was surrounded by monitoring devices, fertility trackers, and medical charts. Even the artwork had been replaced with schedules and treatment protocols. "Your hormone levels are suboptimal," Herschel announced from the doorway, reviewing the latest lab results on his tablet. "We'll need to adjust the medication schedule." "No." The word came out barely above a whisper. "What did you say?" He looked up, his expression darkening. "I said no." Alana turned to face him, years of suppressed anger giving her strength. "I'm done being your science experiment. I'm done with the needles, the hormones, the endless tests. I'm done." Herschel's facade of control cracked slightly. "You can't be done. We're so close to—" "Close to what?" She laughed bitterly. "Close to destroying whatever's left of our marriage? Close to completely losing ourselves in this obsession? This obsession is our future." His voice rose. "Everything I've done has been for us. For our family." "What family?" Alana gestured around the sterile room. "Look at what we've become. We don't talk anymore unless it's about treatments. We don't touch unless it's scheduled. When was the last time you kissed me just because you wanted to?" His silence was deafening. The next morning, Alana found all her fertility medications replaced with new ones. Herschel had ordered them without consulting her, as he'd done countless times before. "These are from a specialist in Geneva," he explained over breakfast, not looking up from his phone. "Their success rates are impressive." "Did you hear anything I said yesterday?" Alana's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "About being done." Now he did look up, his eyes cold. "That wasn't a rational decision. You're emotional, stressed. Once these new treatments—" The coffee cup shattered against the wall, dark liquid staining the pristine white paint. They both stared at the spreading stain, a perfect metaphor for their crumbling marriage. "Emotional?" Alana's voice was dangerously quiet. "You want to see emotional?" She walked to the cabinet filled with fertility medications and began throwing bottles to the floor. Each crash punctuated her words. 15 years of being treated like a defective machine. 15 years of watching you turn from my husband into my jailer. 15 years of being blamed for something that isn't my fault. Herschel grabbed her wrists, stopping her rampage. "Have you lost your mind? Those medications cost—" "Of course," she wrenched away from him. "The cost. That's all you care about. The investment, the returns, the Gibbs family legacy. When did I stop being your wife and become just another business asset?" That evening, they attended a charity gala, maintaining appearances as always. They moved through the crowd like perfect automatons, smiling, making small talk, playing their roles. "The Andersons just had twins," a society matron gushed. "Naturally, at their age, miracles do happen." Alana felt Herschel's hand tighten on her waist, another reminder of their failure, another crack in his carefully constructed image. Later that night, she found him in his study, reviewing yet another experimental treatment protocol. "I remember when this was your music room," she said softly. The grand piano that once filled the space with life and joy had been replaced by filing cabinets full of medical records. "That was childish indulgence," he replied without looking up. "This is more important. More important than our happiness, than our love." He finally met her eyes. "Love doesn't guarantee success, Alana. Love doesn't give us what we need." "And what exactly do we need, Herschel?" Because from where I'm standing, we had everything. We had love, passion, partnership. We lost it all chasing this obsession. The fight that followed was explosive. Years of resentment erupted like a volcano, spewing words they could never take back. "You've turned our marriage into a clinical trial," Alana screamed. "Every moment scheduled, every interaction monitored. I'm suffocating because you don't try hard enough," he roared back. "You say you want a family, but you fight every treatment, question every protocol. Because they're killing us. Can't you see what this is doing to us? To me?" His response was chilling. "What it's doing is showing me your true commitment to our future." The next day, Alana discovered he'd cancelled her therapy appointments with long-term patients, claiming she needed to focus on their latest fertility treatment cycle. It was the last straw. She confronted him in his office, throwing the cancellation notices on his desk. "You had no right." "I had every right." He didn't even look up. "As your husband, as my husband." She slammed her hands on his desk. "A husband supports his wife's dreams. A husband respects his wife's choices. A husband loves his wife for who she is, not what she can give him." Finally, he looked at her, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. "And a wife's primary duty is to her family. Or have you forgotten that?" The words hung between them like poison. In that moment, Alana saw clearly what they'd become. Not partners, not lovers, but jailer and prisoner in a gilded cage. That night she slept in the guest room, surrounded by boxes of yet unused fertility medications. The moon cast shadows through the window, playing across boxes labeled with Swiss and German pharmaceutical companies. Herschel didn't come to find her. The next morning he left a note with her breakfast. "New specialist appointment. 10 a.m. Car will pick you up." She didn't go. When he returned that evening, his rage was cold and controlled, the most frightening version of him. "You embarrassed me," he said quietly. "The specialist is world-renowned. Do you know how many strings I had to pull for that appointment? Do you know how many times I've had to rebuild my practice after you arbitrarily cancelled my appointments?" She counted. "How many patients have suffered because you decided your schedule was more important?" "More important," he stepped closer, towering over her. "Creating our family is the most important thing. Everything else is secondary." "Everything else meaning me, my dreams, my career, my happiness?" His silence was answer enough. Days passed in Arctic coldness. They moved through their penthouse like ghosts, avoiding each other while maintaining perfect facades for the outside world. At their 15th anniversary dinner, a social obligation they couldn't avoid, they performed their roles flawlessly. He gave her an expensive diamond necklace. She smiled and thanked him appropriately. Neither mentioned that morning's negative pregnancy test. The descent of their marriage had become complete. What had started as a love story for the ages had become a cautionary tale of obsession and control. Neither could have predicted how fate would soon intervene, throwing them a curveball that would shatter their carefully constructed world of schedules and treatments. The city lights twinkled below their penthouse, indifferent to the drama unfolding above. In their separate spaces, Alana and Herschel Gibbs continued their dance of pain and pride, unaware that their greatest test was yet to come. Chapter 7. Miracle and Heartbreak. Morning sickness struck like a tidal wave. Alana barely made it to the marble bathroom, her body heaving as 15 years of failed hopes swirled in her mind. As she knelt on the cold floor, a realization began to dawn, one she scarcely dared to acknowledge. She thought back to that night a month ago, when Herschel had come home early for once. There had been a moment, brief but real, when they'd found each other again. No schedules, no treatments, no pressure. Just two people remembering what it was like to love each other. Now, with trembling hands, she reached for the pregnancy test hidden in the back of her drawer. She'd stopped keeping them in plain sight years ago, tired of Herschel's intense scrutiny of each negative result. 5 minutes later, she stared at the unmistakable double line. Positive. After 15 years of trying, of hoping, of praying. Positive. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God." She took 3 more tests, each confirming what seemed impossible. Her medical training kicked in, calculating dates and possibilities. She needed blood work, an ultrasound, proper confirmation before telling anyone, especially before telling Herschel. The next few days passed in a blur of secret doctor's appointments and careful planning. Her own OB/GYN, Dr. Sarah Chen, confirmed what the home tests had suggested. "Everything looks perfect, Doctor," Chen assured her, pointing to the early ultrasound image. "Strong heartbeat, proper placement. You're officially pregnant, Alana." The words she'd longed to hear for 15 years brought fresh tears to her eyes. "I can hardly believe it's real." "It's real," the doctor smiled warmly. "And after all these years, all those treatments, sometimes the body just knows when it's ready." Alana spent the afternoon planning the perfect way to share the news. Despite their recent troubles, this was the moment Herschel had been waiting for. Maybe this miracle was exactly what they needed to heal their fractured relationship. She prepared his favorite meal, set the dining room with their best china, and placed the ultrasound image in a silver envelope beside his plate. Her heart raced with anticipation as she heard his key in the door. "Herschel," she called out, "I've made dinner." He appeared in the doorway, looking tired but intrigued by the formal setup. "What's the occasion?" "Sit down," she smiled, gesturing to his place at the table. "I have something to tell you." He complied, though she could see the wariness in his expression. They'd had too many difficult conversations over elaborate dinners in recent years. "Open the envelope," she encouraged, hardly able to contain herself. Herschel picked up the silver envelope, his movements deliberately slow. As he pulled out the ultrasound image, Alana held her breath. "What is this?" he asked, his voice unnaturally flat. "Look closer," she whispered, moving to stand beside him. "That's our baby, Herschel. I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. Herschel stared at the image, his face unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. "How?" The single word sent a chill down Alana's spine. "What do you mean, how? We've been trying for 15 years. "Exactly." He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. 15 years of nothing, and suddenly you're pregnant, after we stopped all treatments. The accusation in his tone made her blood run cold. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "You tell me." He slammed the ultrasound picture down on the table. 15 years of the best fertility treatments money can buy, and nothing. Then suddenly, miraculously, you're pregnant. "It happens." Alana's voice rose with disbelief and anger. Sometimes when couples stop trying, stop putting pressure on themselves, don't. His voice cut through her explanation like a knife. "Don't insult my intelligence. We both know this isn't possible." Tears sprang to her eyes. "How can you say that?" "This is what we've been praying for." "What you've been praying for, perhaps." His laugh was bitter, cruel. "Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? That I'd be so desperate for a child I'd accept any explanation?" "Figure what out?" Alana felt like she was drowning. "Herschel, this is our baby." "No." He stepped back, his face a mask of cold fury. "No, Alana, this is your baby, because we both know it can't be mine." "What are you talking about? Should I spell it out?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Fine. 2 years ago, when none of the treatments were working, I had additional tests done, private tests. Do you know what they found?" Alana's heart stopped. "What tests?" "I'm sterile, Alana, completely. Have been for years, probably my whole life. The doctor said there was no chance, zero, that I could ever father a child naturally. The room began to spin. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was trying to protect you, he shouted. Protect us! I kept hoping one of the treatments would work, that we'd find a solution. But this, he gestured to the ultrasound, this is not a miracle. This is betrayal. No, Alana shook her head desperately. No, you're wrong. The tests must have been wrong. This baby is yours, Herschel. I've never been with anyone else. Never. Save it. His voice was ice. I should have known something was wrong when you suddenly stopped pushing for treatments. Who is he? Someone from your practice, one of our friends. Stop it, Alana screamed, her hands protectively covering her stomach. How dare you? After everything we've been through, how dare you accuse me of this? Herschel moved to the bar, pouring himself a generous measure of scotch. You know what's ironic? All these years I blamed myself for our failure to conceive. Turns out I was right about that part, just wrong about everything else. Please, Alana begged, tears streaming down her face. Please listen to me. I love you. I would never betray you like that. We need to get you tested again. There must be some mistake. The only mistake, he cut her off, was trusting you. He downed his drink in one gulp. I want you out of this house by morning. What? The word came out as a broken whisper. You heard me. Pack your things and get out. My lawyers will be in touch about divorce proceedings. Herschel, please. And don't think you're getting anything from me, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. The prenup is very clear about infidelity. I'm not leaving, Alana said, finding strength in her desperation. This is my home too, and this is your child. He turned to her, his eyes colder than she'd ever seen them. This thing growing inside you? It's not mine, and as of this moment, neither are you. With that, he strode out of the dining room, leaving Alana standing alone among the ruins of what should have been a celebration. The carefully prepared dinner grew cold, the candles burned low, and still she stood there, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other covering her mouth to stifle her sobs. Hours passed. She heard Herschel moving around upstairs, doors slamming, drawers opening and closing. Eventually, the front door opened and closed, followed by the sound of his car starting up and driving away. In the silence that followed, Alana finally moved. She walked slowly to their bedroom, his bedroom now, she supposed, and began packing a bag. Her movements were mechanical, automated, as if someone else was controlling her body while her mind struggled to process the devastation of the evening. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This moment, this miracle they'd prayed for all these years, should have brought them together. Instead, it had shattered whatever was left of their marriage. As she packed, memories flooded her mind. Their first meeting, their wedding day, all the hopes and dreams they'd shared. How had they come to this? How had love turned so quickly to hatred and suspicion? Dawn was breaking when she finally finished packing the essentials. She left her keys on the kitchen counter, along with her wedding ring. As she waited for her Uber to arrive, she took one last look around the home they'd shared for so many years. The ultrasound picture still lay on the dining room table where Herschel had thrown it. She picked it up, careful not to crease it, and slipped it into her purse. Whatever happened next, this baby was real. This miracle was real, even if Herschel refused to believe it. As her car pulled away from the building, Alana caught a glimpse of their penthouse windows, reflecting the rising sun. 15 years of marriage, of love and hope and disappointment, all ended in one devastating night. She placed a protective hand over her stomach, feeling a fierce surge of love for the tiny life growing inside her. "It's just you and me now, little one," she whispered. "But I promise you, we're going to be okay." The city was waking up around her. people starting their daily routines, unaware that her world had just imploded. Somewhere in that same city, her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, was probably plotting his revenge, preparing for the legal battle to come. But for now, in the quiet of the early morning, Alana allowed herself to feel the full weight of her loss. The man she loved, the life they'd built together, the dreams they'd shared, all gone because he couldn't believe in their miracle. The car carried her toward an uncertain future, but one thing was clear: she would protect this child with everything she had. She would fight Herschel's accusations, prove her faithfulness, and if necessary, rebuild her life from scratch. The sun continued its ascent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was the dawn of a new day, but more than that, it was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one she would face with strength, dignity, and the unshakable knowledge that her miracle baby was exactly that. A miracle. Chapter 8. Finding Strength. The guest room in Jade's apartment felt like both sanctuary and prison. 2 weeks had passed since the night Alana's world shattered, and the reality of her new situation was still sinking in. Morning sickness had become her constant companion, a reminder of both the miracle and the mayhem it had brought to her life. "You need to eat something," Jade insisted, bringing in a tray of crackers and ginger tea. "Both of you need strength for what's coming." What was coming arrived that morning in the form of legal documents. Herschel's lawyers hadn't wasted any time. The divorce papers cited adultery as grounds, demanding paternity testing and invoking every clause of their prenuptial agreement. "He's trying to destroy me," Alana whispered, reading through the thick stack of papers. "Everything we built together, every memory we shared, he wants to erase it all." Jade sat beside her, her journalist's instincts already forming a battle plan. "Then we fight back. You have rights, Alana. And more importantly, you have the truth on your side." The truth. Such a simple word for such a complex situation. Alana's hand rested protectively over her still, flat stomach. She knew with absolute certainty that this was Herschel's child, but how could she prove it when he claimed to be sterile? She thought back to that morning's doctor's appointment. Dr. Chen had confirmed that everything was progressing normally. "Your baby is strong," she'd said, showing Alana the flickering heartbeat on the ultrasound screen. "Focus on staying healthy and calm. Stress isn't good for either of you." But calm seemed impossible when her whole life was in chaos. The media had already caught wind of the story. The society papers were having a field day with rumors about the Gibbs marriage breakdown. Herschel's PR team had been quick to paint him as the wronged husband, while carefully placed sources suggested Alana's infidelity. "We need to get ahead of this," Jade argued, her media experience showing. "You can't let him control the narrative." But Alana wasn't ready for a public battle. Her priority was protecting her baby and maintaining what was left of her dignity. She threw herself into work, grateful that her private practice provided both income and purpose. Her patients' support meant everything. Many had heard the rumors, but their loyalty never wavered. If anything, seeing her continue her work with grace under pressure only increased their respect. 1 month after leaving the penthouse, Alana found an apartment of her own, a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, far from the luxury she'd known with Herschel, but perfect for a fresh start. The day she moved in, a delivery arrived from her mother, a hand-carved wooden crib that had been in their family for generations. "Your grandmother slept in this," her mother said over the phone, "and now your baby will too. Some things are more precious than money, sweetheart." Those words became Alana's mantra as she rebuilt her life, piece by piece. She decorated the nursery with soft colors and gentle lights, creating the peaceful space her child deserved. Each item she chose herself, paying with money she'd earned, finding strength in her independence. The legal battles raged on. Herschel's lawyers were relentless, demanding financial records, phone logs, anything they could use to support their claims of infidelity. Alana's own legal team, led by the formidable Regina Walsh, fought back with equal vigor. He claims to have medical proof of sterility, Regina noted during one strategy session. But conveniently, these tests were done privately, and the records are mysteriously unavailable. Because they don't exist, Alana insisted, or if they do, something's wrong with them. This is his child, Regina. I've never been with anyone else. The lawyer's eyes softened with sympathy. I believe you, Alana, but beliefs don't win court cases. We need evidence. Evidence came from an unexpected source. Dr. Roberts, one of the fertility specialists they'd consulted years ago, reached out after hearing about the divorce. He had records of Herschel's sperm analysis from their treatment attempts. There was reduced motility, he explained, reviewing the files, but not sterility. Whoever told Mr. Gibbs he was completely sterile was either mistaken or... He left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. This revelation gave Alana's case new strength, but it also raised disturbing questions. Had Herschel lied about the private tests, or had someone given him incorrect information, and why had he been so quick to believe the worst of her? As her pregnancy progressed, Alana found strength she never knew she possessed. The baby grew strong and healthy, each checkup a confirmation of the miracle she carried. She began attending prenatal yoga classes, forming friendships with other expectant mothers who didn't care about society gossip or million-dollar divorces. 4 months into her pregnancy, she was showing clearly. The sight of her growing belly in the mirror each morning filled her with joy and determination. This child was a blessing, regardless of the circumstances surrounding its conception. One evening, as she sat in her new apartment reviewing patient files, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a photo of Herschel at some society event, his arm around a tall blonde. The message read, "Thought you should see how quickly he's moved on." Alana deleted the message without responding. She wouldn't let anonymous cruelty shake her resolve. Besides, she had more important things to focus on. Like the first flutter of movement she'd felt that morning. Her baby was making its presence known, reminding her of what really mattered. Her practice continued to thrive, with a waiting list of clients drawn to her combination of professional expertise and personal resilience. She began giving lectures at women's shelters and community centers, sharing her knowledge about healing from emotional trauma. "Your story inspires us," one shelter director told her. "You showed that it's possible to lose everything and still stand tall." But in quiet moments, when the apartment was dark and still, Alana allowed herself to grieve for what she'd lost. Not the luxury or the social position. Those things meant nothing compared to the love she'd shared with Herschel. She mourned the man she'd married, the one who had once looked at her with such tenderness and trust. 6 months into her pregnancy, she had a chance encounter that changed everything. She was leaving her doctor's office when she literally bumped into Herschel's mother, Eleanor Gibbs. "Alana," the older woman breathed, her eyes immediately going to the prominent baby bump. "Oh, my dear." For a moment they stood frozen in the medical building's lobby. Then, to Alana's surprise, Eleanor pulled her into a gentle embrace. "I never believed it," she whispered. "Not for 1 second. I know you, Alana. I know your heart." Tears sprang to Alana's eyes, the first she'd allowed herself to cry in weeks. Would you like to feel the baby kick?" Right there in the lobby, Eleanor Gibbs placed a trembling hand on her former daughter-in-law's stomach. When the baby moved, her eyes filled with tears. "That's my grandchild," she said firmly. "Whatever my son chooses to believe, I know the truth." The meeting gave Alana new hope. If Eleanor could see past Herschel's accusations, maybe others would too. More importantly, her baby would have at least one grandparent who acknowledged them. As her due date approached, Alana focused on preparing for her child's arrival. She took birthing classes, decorated the nursery, and continued building her support network. Her mother moved temporarily to the city to help, while Jade organized a baby shower, attended by loyal friends and supportive clients. The media interest had finally begun to fade, society finding new scandals to occupy their attention. Alana's lawyers continued gathering evidence for the inevitable custody battle, but she refused to let legal matters overshadow the joy of impending motherhood. 7 months into her pregnancy, she received an unexpected visitor at her practice. Dr. Richardson, the fertility specialist who had treated them years ago, asked to speak with her privately. "I've been reviewing our old files," he said, looking troubled. "Something doesn't add up about Mr. Gibbs's claim of sterility. The tests we ran showed reduced fertility, yes, but natural conception was always possible. In fact," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "the timing of your pregnancy coincides with what we might have expected given the treatment protocols we used." Alana's heart raced. "Are you saying you could testify to this?" "I'm saying the medical evidence supports your position. Whether that's enough to convince Mr. Gibbs... He spread his hands helplessly. It was another piece of the puzzle, another fragment of truth to counter Herschel's accusations. But Alana was beginning to realize that no amount of evidence might be enough to overcome his chosen belief in her betrayal. 8 months pregnant, she stood in her new nursery, folding tiny clothes and arranging stuffed animals. The room was nothing like the elaborate nursery she and Herschel had once planned together, but it was filled with love and hope. A soft knock at the door revealed Jade, holding a newspaper. "You need to see this," she said gently. The society pages showed Herschel at another charity event, this time with a different woman. The article mentioned their whirlwind romance and hinted at possible engagement plans. Alana set the paper aside without comment. Let him search for happiness elsewhere. She had found hers in the miracle growing beneath her heart. As her due date drew closer, Alana felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. The legal battles would continue. The society gossip might never fully die. But none of that mattered compared to the new life she was preparing to bring into the world. Her baby shower, organized by Jade and her mother, was a celebration of love and support. Friends and clients filled her apartment with gifts and good wishes, each person there a testament to the relationships she'd built on her own merit. "You're glowing," her mother observed, watching her open presents. "Despite everything, you're stronger and more beautiful than ever." And she was. The past months had taught her that strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it meant standing up to false accusations, sometimes it meant walking away from toxic situations, and sometimes it meant simply getting up each morning and facing the day with grace. 9 months after the night that changed everything, Alana stood at her apartment window, watching the city lights twinkle below. One hand rested on her rounded belly, feeling her child's movements. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to her unborn baby. "No matter what happens, we have each other, and that's all we need." The nursery was ready, the hospital bag was packed, and her support system was in place. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Alana Queen was prepared to face them with the same strength and dignity that had carried her through the past months. The city hummed its eternal lullaby below, indifferent to the drama of its inhabitants' lives. But in a modest apartment, far from the luxury she'd once known, a woman stood tall and proud, ready to embrace the next chapter of her journey. Her baby kicked, as if in agreement, and Alana smiled. This wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was a life filled with purpose, love, and the kind of strength that can only come from facing your greatest challenges and emerging stronger. Chapter 9. The Truth Emerges. The manila envelope sat unopened on Regina Walsh's polished mahogany desk. its contents about to shatter the foundation of Herschel Gibbs's accusations. 3 years had passed since that fateful night when he'd rejected both his wife and unborn child. Now, justice was finally within reach. "Are you sure you want to know what's in here?" Regina asked, her hand resting on the envelope. The veteran lawyer had seen enough cases to know that sometimes truth could be more devastating than uncertainty. Alana shifted young Zaire on her lap, her beautiful 3-year-old son, the living embodiment of her vindication. His features were a perfect blend of both parents, though Herschel still refused to see it. "I need to know," she said firmly. "We both do." The past 3 years had been a journey of both pain and triumph. While Herschel had done everything in his power to discredit her, Alana had focused on building a life for herself and Zaire. Her therapy practice had expanded to 3 locations, specializing in helping women recover from emotional trauma. She'd published a well-received book about resilience and healing, drawing from her own experiences without directly addressing the scandal. Regina carefully opened the envelope, removing a stack of medical records. "These took some doing to obtain," she explained. "Someone went to great lengths to keep them hidden." The records detailed a series of private medical consultations Herschel had undertaken 2 years into their marriage. But unlike the sterility diagnosis he'd claimed, these showed something very different. He had indeed had fertility issues, low sperm motility that made conception difficult but not impossible. More importantly, the doctors had recommended treatments that he'd never shared with Alana. "He knew," Alana whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "All those years of blaming me, making me feel like I was the problem, he knew there were treatments available for him." Regina nodded grimly. "According to these records, he was advised to undergo a specific treatment protocol. Instead, he chose to focus all medical interventions on you." "But why?" Alana's voice cracked with emotion. "Why would he put me through all that if he knew he could have done something himself?" The answer lay in the psychological evaluation included in the records. Herschel's deep-seated fears about his masculinity, his need to maintain control, and his terror of being seen as less than perfect had led him to project all fertility issues onto Alana. "Pride," Regina said softly, "and a kind of fear so deep he couldn't face it. It was easier to let you bear the burden than admit his own vulnerability." Zaire stirred in his mother's lap, his dark eyes, so like his father's, looking up at her with innocent concern. "Mama sad." "No, baby," Alana kissed his forehead. "Mama's just thinking about some grown-up things." But inside, her emotions were a storm of anger, hurt, and vindication. The revelation sparked a new phase in their legal battle. Regina immediately filed motions to reopen the divorce settlement, citing fraudulent concealment of medical evidence. The media, which had largely moved on from their story, suddenly found fresh interest. Headlines screamed, "Gibbs fertility scandal, the truth revealed," and medical records expose years of deception. Herschel's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. His response was swift and desperate. His legal team tried to suppress the records, claiming doctor-patient confidentiality. When that failed, they attempted to discredit their authenticity. But the evidence was irrefutable. The turning point came during a deposition where Dr. James Morrison, the specialist who had treated Herschel years ago, testified under oath. "Mr. Gibbs came to me in confidence," the doctor stated. "He was diagnosed with reduced fertility, but not sterility. We discussed various treatment options, all of which he declined. He specifically requested that this information be kept from his wife." The transcript of this testimony found its way to Eleanor Gibbs, who had maintained a secret relationship with Alana and Zaire despite her son's opposition. The distinguished matriarch finally reached her breaking point. "Enough," she declared during a tense family dinner. What you've done to that woman, to your own child. It's unforgivable, Herschel. Her public statement supporting Alana and acknowledging Zaire as her grandson sent shockwaves through their social circle. One by one, longtime family friends began distancing themselves from Herschel, his reputation tarnished not by the fertility issues he'd feared would shame him, but by his treatment of his wife and child. Alana watched the fallout from a distance, finding no joy in Herschel's public humiliation. Her focus remained where it had been for the past 3 years, on Zaire's well-being and her own healing. Their son was a daily miracle, his personality a bright light that attracted everyone around him. He had his father's determination and his mother's empathy, combined with an infectious laugh that could light up any room. Despite Herschel's rejection, Zaire thrived, surrounded by love from Alana's family and friends. One autumn afternoon, as Alana watched Zaire playing in the park near their home, a familiar figure approached. Herschel stood awkwardly at the edge of the playground, his once confident posture now uncertain. "He looks like me," he said quietly, watching Zaire chase bubbles with other children. "I see it now." Alana remained silent, her heart racing with emotions she thought she'd put to rest. The man before her was different from the controlled, powerful figure who had once dominated her life. The past 3 years had marked him as well, adding grey to his temples and lines around his eyes. "The medical records," he began, then stopped, swallowing hard. "I never thought they'd come to light." "Did you think about what you were doing to me?" Alana asked, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "All those years of treatments, tests, accusations, did you ever think about what that was doing to my heart, my soul?" "I couldn't face it," he admitted, looking away. "The thought of being less than perfect, of being the reason we couldn't have children. It was easier to focus everything on you." "Easier?" She laughed bitterly. "You destroyed our marriage, rejected your own child, and dragged my name through the mud because it was easier than admitting you needed help." "I was wrong," he whispered, the words seeming to cost him physically. "So terribly wrong, about everything." Zaire's laughter carried across the playground, drawing both their attention. He had succeeded in catching a bubble, his face alight with triumph. "He's beautiful," Herschel said softly. "Perfect." "Yes, he is," Alana agreed. "No thanks to you." The harshness of her words made him flinch, but she felt no remorse. 3 years of single parenthood, of defending her reputation, of building a new life from the ashes of his betrayal, she'd earned the right to her anger. "I want to make things right," he said finally. "Whatever it takes. I'll publicly acknowledge him, set up a trust fund, anything you want." "What I wanted was a husband who trusted me," Alana replied. "A father who loved our child, regardless of how he came to be. That's all I ever wanted, Herschel." Zaire noticed them then, running over with the innocent enthusiasm of childhood. He stopped short of Herschel, suddenly shy, half hiding behind his mother's legs. "Hello, Zaire," Herschel said softly, kneeling to the boy's level. I'm very happy to meet you." The child looked up at his mother, seeking reassurance. At her slight nod, he stepped forward. "Do you like bubbles?" he asked solemnly. "I do," Herschel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Very much." What followed was an awkward but touching scene of father and son chasing bubbles together, while Alana watched with a mixture of joy and trepidation. She knew this was just the beginning of a long, complicated journey. The truth had finally emerged, but its impact was still unfolding. The medical records had proven what Alana had known all along, that Zaire was indeed Herschel's son, conceived against odds but very much a product of their love. The legal implications were significant. Regina was already preparing motions to revise the divorce settlement, taking into account Herschel's deliberate concealment of his medical condition. But more important than any financial consideration was the validation of Alana's truth. As she watched Herschel tentatively bonding with their son, Alana reflected on the path that had brought them here. The pain hadn't disappeared, nor had the anger at his betrayal, but seeing Zair's joy at playing with his father stirred something in her heart. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the playground, marking the end of another day. Soon she would take Zaire home, back to the life she'd built for them. Herschel would return to his world, but things would never be quite the same. The truth had emerged, bringing with it both healing and new complications. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: the story of Alana, Herschel, and their miracle child was far from over. As they left the playground that evening, Zaire chattering excitedly about his new playmate, Alana felt a strange peace settle over her. The truth had finally set her free, not just from the weight of false accusations, but from the last lingering doubts about her own strength. The city lights began to twinkle as they walked home, mother and son, hand in hand, leaving Herschel to watch them go. The truth had emerged, but its echoes would continue to shape their lives in ways none of them could yet imagine. Chapter 10. Justice served. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and photographers, their cameras flashing like lightning in the morning sun. Alana Queen stepped out of her lawyer's car, head held high, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit that projected both strength and dignity. 3 years of silence were about to end. Regina Walsh walked beside her, briefcase containing the damning medical records that would change everything. Behind them, Eleanor Gibbs emerged from her own vehicle, her presence a clear statement of support that sent whispers rippling through the assembled media. "Are you ready for this?" Regina asked quietly as they approached the courthouse doors. Alana took a deep breath, thinking of Zaire safely at home with her mother. "I've been ready for 3 years." The courtroom was packed with spectators, society figures, media representatives, and even some of Alana's former patients who had come to show their support. The buzz of conversation died as Herschel entered with his legal team, his once confident stride now showing hints of uncertainty. Judge Miranda Chen surveyed the courtroom with experienced eyes. She had presided over high-profile cases before, but this one was different. This wasn't just about money or reputation, it was about truth, justice, and the redemption of a woman's honor. "Your Honor," Regina began, her voice clear and strong. 3 years ago, Herschel Gibbs accused my client of adultery and paternity fraud. He used his power and influence to destroy her reputation, deny his own child, and attempt to leave her destitute. Today, we will prove that Mr. Gibbs's accusations were not only false, but were part of a calculated deception to hide his own medical condition. Herschel's lead attorney, James Morton, jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making inflammatory statements. Statements we will prove with documented evidence," Regina countered smoothly, "including medical records that Mr. Gibbs deliberately concealed during the original divorce proceedings." Judge Chen leaned forward. "Proceed, Ms. Walsh." What followed was a masterclass in legal presentation. Regina methodically laid out the evidence, starting with the original fertility clinic records, showing Herschel's diagnosed condition, reduced fertility but not sterility. Dr. James Morrison took the stand first, his testimony devastating to Herschel's case. "Mr. Gibbs came to me in 2012, seeking treatment for fertility issues. I diagnosed him with reduced sperm motility, a condition that makes conception more difficult, but certainly not impossible. I recommended several treatment options, all of which he declined." "And did Mr. Gibbs request anything specific regarding these consultations?" Regina asked. Yes, the doctor replied. He insisted that all records be kept strictly confidential and separate from his regular medical files. He was particularly adamant that his wife not be informed. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Alana watched Herschel's face, seeing the mask of control beginning to crack. Next came Dr. Sarah Chen, who had supervised Alana's pregnancy. The conception and pregnancy were completely consistent with what we would expect, given Mr. Gibbs's diagnosed condition. Natural conception was always possible, just less likely. In fact, this kind of surprise pregnancy often occurs when couples stop actively trying and their stress levels decrease. Regina produced more documents, emails between Herschel and his private physician discussing ways to keep his condition secret, receipts for treatments he'd undergone, while telling Alana she was the one who needed help, psychological evaluations revealing his deep-seated fears about his masculinity and need for control. Your Honor, Regina addressed the court, these records paint a clear picture. Mr. Gibbs didn't just hide his condition. He deliberately subjected my client to years of unnecessary treatments while knowing he was equally responsible for their fertility challenges. Then, when a natural conception finally occurred, he used his own secret condition as grounds to accuse her of infidelity. Eleanor Gibbs took the stand next, her testimony carrying the weight of both family authority and maternal anguish. I watched my son systematically destroy a woman who loved him, deny his own child, all because he couldn't face his own insecurities. The moment I saw my grandson, I knew the truth. He is undeniably a Gibbs. During a brief recess, Alana found herself face to face with Herschel in a courthouse corridor. The man who had once towered over her life now seemed diminished. "You could have stopped this," she said quietly. "All you had to do was tell the truth." "I never thought—" he began, then stopped. "I convinced myself the lie was easier than the truth." "Easier for whom?" She met his eyes steadily. "While you were protecting your pride, I was fighting to protect our son." Back in session, Herschel's legal team tried to maintain their defense, but their arguments grew increasingly desperate. They attempted to challenge the authenticity of the medical records, only to have each document verified by multiple sources. The turning point came when Regina played a video deposition from Dr. Richardson, their original fertility specialist. Mr. Gibbs was informed multiple times that his condition contributed to their conception difficulties. He specifically requested that this information be downplayed in discussions with Mrs. Gibbs, insisting that all treatment focus on her. Finally, Regina called Alana to the stand. The courtroom fell silent as she was sworn in, her quiet dignity commanding attention. "Mrs. Queen," Regina began using Alana's professional name, "please tell the court about the night you informed Mr. Gibbs of your pregnancy." Alana's voice remained steady as she recounted that devastating evening, the careful dinner preparation, the joy she'd felt, the shock of his accusation and rejection. "I had no idea about his medical condition. All those years, he let me believe I was the only reason we couldn't conceive. When he accused me of infidelity, it wasn't just an attack on my honor. It was a betrayal of every moment we'd shared, every dream we'd built together." "And how has this affected your life?" "I lost my husband, my home, my social standing. But worse than that, my son lost his father. Zaire spent the first 3 years of his life being denied by the man who should have protected and loved him. No court ruling can give those years back to him." Judge Chen's ruling was unequivocal. She ordered a complete revision of the divorce settlement, taking into account Herschel's deliberate fraud. More importantly, she issued a strong statement about the emotional damage his actions had caused. "Mr. Gibbs," she addressed him directly, "this court finds your behavior not just legally fraudulent, but morally reprehensible. You used your power and resources to perpetrate a devastating lie, causing immeasurable harm to both your former wife and your innocent child. The judge awarded Alana full custody of Zaire, with Herschel granted supervised visitation rights only after completing counseling. The financial settlement was revised dramatically in Alana's favor, including substantial back support and damages. But the most significant victory wasn't financial. As Alana stood on the courthouse steps afterward, surrounded by supporters and media, she finally told her story publicly. 3 years ago, I was accused of betraying my marriage vows and deceiving my husband about our child's paternity. Today, the truth has finally come to light. But this isn't just about vindication. It's about speaking up for every woman who has been wrongly accused, every mother who has fought to protect her child, every person who has had to rebuild their life after being unjustly condemned. Her words made headlines across the country. Women's organizations hailed her as a symbol of resilience and courage. Her story inspired others to come forward with their own experiences of gaslighting and emotional abuse. That evening, as Alana tucked Zaire into bed, he asked a question that broke her heart. "Is Daddy sorry for being mean to us?" She stroked his hair, so like his father's, and chose her words carefully. "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes because they're scared or confused. But that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean it was ever your fault." Later, sitting in her living room with Jade and her mother, Alana finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day's events. "It's really over," she whispered, tears flowing freely. "No," Jade corrected gently. "It's just beginning. You're not only vindicated, you're stronger than ever. Look at what you've built, what you've overcome." Indeed, Alana's life had transformed during the years of struggle. Her practice had grown into a renowned center for emotional healing and women's empowerment. Her book about resilience was helping others find their own strength. She had created a beautiful life for herself and Zaire, one built on truth and integrity rather than appearances and pride. The media coverage of the trial's conclusion was extensive, but this time the narrative was different. Alana was portrayed not as a victim, but as a champion, a woman who had faced false accusations with dignity and emerged triumphant. Herschel's public statement, released through his PR team, acknowledged his deception and expressed regret for his actions. But Alana knew that true healing, for all of them, would take more than carefully crafted words. As she stood at her window that night, watching the city lights twinkle below, Alana reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something else: wisdom, strength, and a deep understanding of her own worth. Justice had been served, not just in the legal sense, but in the restoration of truth and dignity. The road ahead would have its own challenges, particularly as Herschel sought to establish a relationship with Zaire, but Alana faced the future with confidence. The city hummed its eternal lullaby, but its rhythm seemed different now, less a reminder of what she'd lost, and more a celebration of what she'd gained. In the end, justice had prevailed, and with it came not just vindication, but liberation. Chapter 11. Redemption. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Alana's new office, illuminating the tastefully decorated space that served as the headquarters of the Queen Foundation for Women's Empowerment. 1 year after the trial that had vindicated her name, Alana had transformed her personal triumph into a mission to help others. The foundation occupied an entire floor of a renovated historic building downtown, a far cry from both her modest apartment during the struggle and the luxury penthouse of her married life. Here, she had created something entirely her own, a space where women could find support, healing, and the strength to rebuild their lives. "Mum!" 4-year-old Zaire's voice echoed through the hallway as he ran into her office, followed by his father. These supervised visits had become part of their new routine, a careful dance of reconciliation and boundaries. Hersheli looked different now, humbled by the events of the past year, but also somehow more authentic. The mask of perfect control had cracked, revealing a man finally learning to face his own vulnerabilities. "He wanted to show you his drawing," Hershel explained, watching as Zaire proudly displayed a colorful artwork featuring 3 figures holding hands. "That's you, and that's Daddy, and that's me in the middle," Zaire pointed excitedly. "Ms. Thompson said we should draw our family." The moment hung between them, loaded with unspoken emotions. Family, such a simple word for such a complex reality. The past year had been a journey of redefinition for all of them. After the trial, Hershel had followed the court's orders meticulously. He attended therapy sessions both individually and with Alana, working to understand the deep-seated fears and insecurities that had driven his destructive behavior. "I've been thinking," he said after Zaire had settled in the office's play area. "The Foundation's new initiative for mental health support. I'd like to help fund it, not just with money, but with my story." Alana studied him carefully. "Your story?" "My shame about the fertility issues. The way I projected it onto you. The damage I caused trying to maintain control. Maybe sharing that could help others, other men who are struggling with similar fears." It was the kind of self-awareness that would have been impossible for the old Hershel. Therapy had helped him understand how his father's expectations and society's pressures had shaped his reactions, turning a medical condition into a crisis of masculinity that had nearly destroyed his family. "I think that could be powerful," Alana agreed. "But are you ready for that level of vulnerability, the media attention?" He smiled wryly. "I think I've learned that hiding the truth only makes things worse." Their conversation was interrupted by Eleanor Gibbs's arrival. The family matriarch had become a regular presence in their lives, bridging the gap between past and present. She had also become one of the Foundation's strongest supporters, lending her social influence to its causes. "There's my precious boy," Eleanor gathered Zaire into her arms. "And how are my favorite parents doing today?" The easy way she normalized their new family dynamic had helped smooth many awkward moments. She treated their current situation not as a tragedy to be mourned, but as a reality to be embraced and improved. Later that afternoon, Alana led a support group session in the Foundation's main meeting room. Women from all walks of life shared their stories of gaslighting, emotional abuse, and the struggle to reclaim their truth. Her own experience had become a beacon of hope for others. "When my husband denied our child," one woman shared tearfully, "I thought I would break. But seeing how you fought back, how you built something positive from the pain, it gave me courage." These sessions were the heart of the Foundation's work. Beyond the legal aid they provided, beyond the practical support and resources, this was where real healing happened, in the sharing of stories, in the recognition that no one had to face these battles alone. Hershel had begun attending some of the Foundation's events, usually sitting quietly in the back, listening and learning. The man who had once dominated every room with his presence was learning the power of silent observation. One evening, after a particularly powerful session, he lingered behind to talk to Alana. "I never understood," he admitted, "all those years of controlling everything, of needing to be perfect. I was creating exactly the kind of damage you're helping people heal from now." "Understanding that is the first step to change," she replied. "You're not that person anymore, Hershel." Their relationship had evolved into something neither of them could have predicted. Not the passionate love of their early years, not the bitter enmity of their conflict, but something new. a cautious partnership built on hard-earned wisdom and shared concern for their son. Zaire had adapted to their new reality with the resilience of childhood. He loved his time with both parents, accepting their separate lives while treasuring the moments they could all share together. His presence forced them to maintain communication, to work through their issues with maturity and grace. The Foundation's work expanded rapidly. Alana's book had become a bestseller, its message of resilience and redemption resonating with readers worldwide. She was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and women's organizations, sharing her journey from victim to victor. "The real redemption," she often said in her speeches, "isn't in proving you were right. It's in finding the strength to build something meaningful from the ruins of what was destroyed." Herschel attended one of these speeches, sitting in the audience with Eleanor. Watching Alana command the stage, helping others find their voice, he felt a complex mixture of pride and regret. "She's magnificent," Eleanor observed. "She always was, but now everyone can see it." "I should have seen it sooner," he replied quietly. "Should have trusted her truth instead of hiding behind my own fears." The Foundation's first anniversary gala was a testament to how far they'd all come. Held in the city's most prestigious venue, it brought together supporters, survivors, and advocates for women's empowerment. Alana, stunning in a deep blue gown, delivered a speech that brought the room to tears. "1 year ago, I stood in a courtroom fighting for my truth. Today, I stand before you celebrating not just my victory, but the victory of every woman who has found the courage to reclaim her story. This foundation exists because we refuse to let pain have the last word. We choose instead to transform it into purpose." Herschel had made a substantial donation to the Foundation's endowment, ensuring its work could continue and expand. But more valuable than the money was his public acknowledgement of his past actions and his commitment to change. "My former wife," he said in his own speech at the gala, "taught me the true meaning of strength. It's not in maintaining perfect control or hiding our vulnerabilities. It's in having the courage to face our truths, to admit our wrongs, and to do the hard work of becoming better." Their story had become more than just a society scandal or a courtroom drama. It had evolved into a powerful narrative about healing, growth, and the possibility of redemption. Not through easy forgiveness, but through genuine transformation. As the gala wound down, Alana found a quiet moment on the venue's terrace. The city stretched out before her, its lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. 5 years ago, she had stood on a different terrace, her world crumbling around her. Now she stood as a woman who had not just survived, but thrived. Herschel joined her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You've created something extraordinary here," he said softly. "We all did," she replied. "Every person who shared their story, every supporter who believed in the mission, even you, with your willingness to face your truth and change." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city below. Their journey had been one of destruction and rebuilding, of pain and healing, of loss and unexpected gains. The redemption they'd found wasn't the one they'd expected. It was better, deeper, more authentic. The Foundation would continue to grow, touching more lives, helping more women find their strength. Zaire would grow up surrounded by examples of resilience, learning that real strength lies not in power or control, but in the courage to be vulnerable and true. As for Alana and Herschel, they had found their way to a new kind of relationship, one built on respect, understanding, and the shared love for their son. It wasn't the fairy tale they'd once believed in, but perhaps it was something more valuable, a story of real human growth and transformation. The city hummed its eternal lullaby below, bearing witness to their continued journey. The chapter of redemption wasn't ending. It was still being written, one day, one choice, one act of courage at a time. Chapter 12. New Beginnings. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel buzzed with anticipation. 5 years to the day since the court verdict that had changed everything, hundreds of people had gathered to celebrate the Queen Foundation's latest triumph, the opening of its 10th Center for Women's Empowerment. Alana stood backstage, smoothing her emerald green gown, her heart full as she watched Zaire practice his speech. At 7 years old, he had insisted on introducing his mother at this milestone event. His index cards shook slightly in his small hands as he rehearsed. "Mum," he looked up with those familiar dark eyes, his father's eyes. "What if I mess up?" "Then you'll keep going," she smiled, kneeling to straighten his tie. "Just like we always do." The past 5 years had been a journey of transformation for all of them. The foundation had grown beyond Alana's wildest dreams, helping thousands of women reclaim their lives and their truth. Her book had spawned a movement, inspiring others to turn their pain into purpose. Herschel entered quietly, his presence no longer carrying the weight of past tensions. Time and therapy had softened their interactions, allowing them to build a new kind of family dynamic, not what they'd originally planned, but perhaps what they all needed. "There's my boy," he smiled, watching Zaire practicing. "Ready for your big moment?" Their son beamed, pride replacing nervousness. "I wrote it all myself. Well, Grandma Eleanor helped a little with the big words." The mention of Eleanor brought warmth to Alana's heart. The family matriarch had become an unexpected bridge between past and present, helping them all navigate their new reality with grace and wisdom. She sat in the front row now, elegant as ever, beaming with grandmother's pride. The ballroom itself was a testament to how far they'd come. Photos lined the walls, women sharing their stories of survival and triumph, centers opening across the country, lives being transformed. Among them was the courthouse photo from 5 years ago, Alana standing tall despite the chaos around her. 5 minutes, the event coordinator announced, prompting a flurry of last-minute preparations. Alana took a moment to center herself, remembering the journey that had brought them here. The night Herschel had rejected their miracle baby, the years of struggle, the vindication in court. Each step had led to this moment, this purpose. The lights dimmed, and Zaire stepped onto the stage with a confidence that made both his parents proud. "My mom," he began, his clear voice carrying across the hushed room, "is the strongest person I know. When I was little, she taught me that being strong doesn't mean you never fall down. It means you always get back up. She's helped so many people get back up, and I'm really proud that she's my mom." Tears pricked Alana's eyes as applause filled the room. This was her legacy, not the pain or the scandal, but the strength and hope she'd found in its aftermath. She took the stage to a standing ovation, embracing her son before he returned to sit between his father and grandmother. The sight of them together, supporting each other despite their complex history, filled her with unexpected peace. 5 years ago, she began, her voice steady and strong, I stood in a courtroom, fighting for my truth. Today, I stand before you celebrating not just my journey, but the journey of every person who has ever had to fight to be believed, to be heard, to be valued. The Foundation's achievements flashed across the giant screens, 10 centers across the country, thousands of women helped, partnerships with major organizations, legislative changes influenced by their advocacy. But our greatest achievement isn't in the numbers, she continued. It's in the stories. The mother who found courage to leave an abusive situation, the executive who stood up to workplace harassment, the young woman who reclaimed her voice after years of gaslighting. These are the true measures of our success. Her eyes met Herschel's in the audience. He nodded slightly, acknowledging their shared journey. Earlier that day, he had made another substantial donation to the foundation, not out of guilt now, but from genuine belief in its mission. "We all have chapters in our lives we didn't choose," Alana went on. "Moments that test us, break us, reshape us. The question isn't whether these chapters will come, but what we'll write in their aftermath. Will we let pain define us? Or will we use it to fuel something greater than ourselves?" The room hung on her every word, many wiping tears as they recognized their own struggles in her story. Tonight, as we celebrate opening our 10th center, I'm grateful not just for our success, but for every step of the journey that brought us here. The hardest chapters often lead to the most beautiful beginnings. After her speech, as the evening progressed into celebration, Alana found herself on the hotel's terrace, the same one where she'd stood as a bride years ago. The city lights twinkled below, unchanged, yet everything was different. "You've created something remarkable," Herschel's voice came from behind her, "something that will outlast all of us." She turned to face him, noting how time had softened them both. "We all did. Even our mistakes led us here." "Mom! Dad!" Zaire burst onto the terrace, full of 7-year-old energy. "Grandma says it's time for the cake." They shared a smile over their son's excitement. This was their new normal, not the family they'd planned, but one that had emerged stronger through adversity. Back inside, Eleanor had gathered everyone for the ceremonial cake cutting. The room was filled with foundation supporters, survivors turned advocates, and family both blood and chosen. As Alana surveyed the crowd, she saw the full circle of their journey. Jade, still her fiercest friend and supporter. Regina Walsh, who had fought so hard for justice. Dr. Chen, who had supported her through the pregnancy. Even some of Herschel's family members, who had initially shunned her, had come around, witnessing the power of truth and transformation. "Make a wish, Mom," Zaire encouraged as she prepared to blow out the candles. Alana smiled, looking at her son's shining face, at the supportive community around them, at the legacy of hope they'd built from pain. What more could she wish for? The candles flickered out to applause, and Zaire hugged her tightly. Over his head, her eyes met Herschel's again, sharing a moment of understanding. They had both grown so much from the people they used to be. Later that night, after the celebrations had wound down and Zaire was asleep at his father's house for the weekend, Alana stood in her office at the foundation. Photos of their journey lined the walls, newspaper clippings, center openings, success stories. Among them was Zaire's first drawing of their unconventional family, now professionally framed. Her phone buzzed with messages of congratulation, but one caught her eye, a text from a woman they'd helped recently. "Watching you tonight gave me hope. Thank you for showing us that our darkest chapters don't have to be our ending." Alana smiled, touching the frame of Zaire's drawing. Their story hadn't ended with betrayal or vindication. It had evolved into something more powerful, a testament to resilience, growth, and the endless possibility of new beginnings. The city hummed its eternal lullaby below, but its rhythm was different now. No longer a reminder of what she'd lost, but a celebration of what she'd found. Strength she never knew she had, purpose born from pain, and a family redefined by love and truth. As she gathered her things to leave, Alana paused at the window. The night sky was clear, stars twinkling above the city lights. Somewhere out there, other women were facing their own battles, fighting their own demons. Tomorrow she would continue her work, helping them find their strength, their voice, their new beginnings. But tonight, she simply stood in gratitude for every step of her journey, the love, the loss, the pain, and the triumph. Each piece had led her here, to this moment, to this purpose. And that, perhaps, was the greatest new beginning of all. Subscribe, if you liked.